The boy's hand was already in the air, clenched into a fist, when a shadow fell over him. It wasn't the shadow of a teacher or another student. It was heavier, stronger, a wall that did not move. The girl on the ground blinked through the sting of tears. In the chaos of adrenaline, she barely noticed the man who now stood between her and the bully. But the boy did. He froze. His smirk faded. The man said nothing. He didn't need to. The air seemed to shift, not colder, not warmer, but heavier, as if the weight of his presence pressed down on every inch of that narrow alley behind the school. His eyes were calm, unreadable, the kind that had seen far worse than this. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint scrape of sneakers on cracked pavement. The boy lowered his hand. But he didn't step back. Jake Turner hadn't planned to stop here. He'd been on his way to pick up his own daughter from school. Just another Thursday in a quiet, unremarkable life. But habits learned in the desert don't fade easily. He noticed movement where others didn't. Heard tension in voices others ignored. And when he saw the tall boy shove the smaller girl against the wall, something deep inside him moved, the same instinct that once made him run toward gunfire. Jake carried the look of a man who had lived several lives in one. The kind of face that could tell 1,000 silent stories, some too heavy for words. His left wrist still bore the faint tan line where a military watch had rested for years. His right knee ached whenever it rained, a constant reminder of the roadside blast in Kandahar. He was 23 when his closest friend died in his arms, 31 when his wife lost her battle with cancer, 35 when he hung up his uniform for good and found himself a single father to a 9-year-old girl, with no roadmap for civilian life. But nothing in those years had worn away the unshakable center in him, a quiet that wasn't emptiness, but control. Now that quiet was the only thing holding the moment together. The boy sneered, perhaps to hide his own unease. "What's it to you, old man?" Jake didn't answer. He didn't move. The silence stretched, taut as wire. Around them, other students lingered at a distance, eyes darting between the two. No one stepped in. No one called for help. It was the kind of silence that often cloaks injustice, the silence of people hoping someone else will act. Jake's gaze didn't waver. "You don't have to shout to be strong," his old platoon sergeant used to say. "You just have to be the last one still standing." Ah. The boy's smirk faltered again. Something in Jake's steady breathing, in the stillness of his posture, began to strip away the bravado. The girl scrambled to her feet. Her backpack had ripped open in the fall, spilling books and papers across the ground. Jake knelt, gathering them silently. He brushed the dust from the corner of her notebook before handing it back. She looked up at him, and in that glance, something shifted. She saw the faint scar cutting through his eyebrow, the lines around his eyes that were not born from laughter. She saw someone who understood fear, but did not bow to it. "Thank you," she whispered. Jake gave a small nod. The boy muttered curses under his breath and turned away. The crowd dissolved in the way crowds always do when tension is gone quickly, pretending they had never been watching. Jake turned to leave, expecting this to be the end of it. But then a low hum of an approaching engine caught his ear. A sleek black sedan glided to the curb. The back door opened before the tires had stopped rolling. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, scanning the scene sharply. He hurried to the girl. "Miss Harper, are you all right?" His voice was urgent, almost reverent. Jake paused mid-step. "Miss Harper?" The man straightened, now looking at Jake with something between suspicion and respect. "She's been looking for you," the man said, as if it made perfect sense. That night, Jake learned the girl's name was Emily Harper. Her father was Charles Harper, CEO of one of the largest corporations in the state. The man whose face appeared in financial magazines, who spoke at charity galas and political fundraisers. The man Jake had once seen on television shaking hands with a senator. When Jake was summoned to Harper's office the next day, he entered expecting a perfunctory "thank you." The room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Harper rose from behind his desk. His presence was commanding, but his voice was quiet. "My daughter told me what happened," Harper said. "You stepped in when no one else did. You have my gratitude." Jake shrugged lightly. Any decent person would have done the same. Harper's gaze sharpened. "But they didn't. You did. And in my world, that matters." In the days that followed, word of the encounter spread not through the news, but in whispered retellings. Parents told their children. Teachers told colleagues. Students replayed the moment in hushed tones, trying to explain why the air had felt so heavy when the soldier stood his ground. One student later posted online. "He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just stood there. And somehow, that was louder than anything." Weeks later, Jake was invited to a charity dinner hosted by Harper Industries. He resisted at first. Formal gatherings weren't his world, but Emily insisted. When Jake entered the ballroom, conversation faltered for a heartbeat. Harper paused mid-speech to acknowledge him. "Some heroes don't wear uniforms anymore," Harper said to the crowd. "Some walk among us quietly, without expecting thanks. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't give it." Mine. The room rose to its feet, not in applause, in silence. A collective standing at attention. Jake's chest tightened. He thought of his platoon, of the men who never made it home, of the quiet they deserved but never received. Later that night, as Jake stepped into the cool night air, Harper joined him. "You know," Harper said, "in business, I've learned that true power doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It just stands there, until the world has no choice but to move around it." Jake gave a small smile. "That's not power," he said. "That's just refusing to step aside when it matters." Iconic quotes from the story. You don't have to shout to be strong. You just have to be the last one still standing. Some heroes don't wear uniforms anymore. Some walk among us quietly, without expecting thanks. That's not power. That's just refusing to step aside when it matters. And so, the soldier returned to his quiet life. But in that city, his story remained. Not because he had saved the CEO's daughter, but because he had reminded everyone of something they'd almost forgotten, that sometimes, the most powerful stand you can take is a silent one.